The alarm system screamed through the small Earth vessel as massive warships emerged from the darkness of space. Captain Hana watched the screens with calm eyes while her crew scrambled to their stations. She had seen the intelligence reports about these ships. The Valtheris Empire had found Earth, and they had come with overwhelming force. "Captain, we're being targeted by 12 separate weapon systems," her pilot shouted over the noise. "We can't outrun them." Hana nodded slowly. She had known this mission might end badly. The Outer Rim was dangerous, but Earth needed information about the species that controlled this region of space. Now she understood why so many civilizations had fallen silent. The Valtheris didn't negotiate. They conquered. "Send the emergency beacon back to Earth," Hana ordered. "Make sure they know what we found here." The battle lasted less than 3 minutes. The Valtheris weapons tore through the Earthship's shields like they were made of paper. Hana felt the ship shudder and heard the screams of her crew as sections depressurized. She held onto her command chair and watched her people die around her. The pain was sharp and familiar. She had lost soldiers before. When the boarding party arrived, Hana was the only one left alive. She had sealed herself in the command center and waited. The Valtheris soldiers that came through the door were tall, with gray skin and eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. They wore armor that hummed with energy, and their weapons were pointed directly at her head. "Surrender," one of them said in perfect English. The translation technology was impressive. Hana stood up slowly, her hands visible and empty. "I surrender," she said. Her voice was steady. She looked each soldier in the eye, studying them, memorizing their equipment and behavior. Even in defeat, she was gathering intelligence. They took her to their flagship. The ship was enormous, easily 100 times larger than her vessel had been. The corridors were cold and filled with Valtheris soldiers who stopped to stare at her as she was escorted past. She noticed they kept their distance, their weapons always ready. They expected her to be afraid. She wasn't. Commander Vorak was waiting in the interrogation chamber. He was older than the soldiers, with scars that marked his gray skin and eyes that had seen countless battles. He studied Hana as she was brought before him, and she studied him back. "I am Commander Vorak of the Valtheris Empire," he said. "You are the first human we have captured alive. Your crew died quickly. You survived. Why?" "I was lucky," Hana replied. She sat down in the chair they had provided without being told to. Or unlucky, depending on how you look at it. Vorak circled her slowly. "Your species is new to us. We detected your homeworld 3 cycles ago. Primitive technology, limited space presence, no significant defenses. We expected no resistance. No resistance. No resistance. No resistance." "Then you haven't been paying attention," Hana said. She met his eyes without flinching. "We've been fighting since we learned to stand upright. We're good at it." Something flickered across Vorak's face. Confusion, perhaps, or concern. "You show no fear," he observed. "Every species we have encountered displays fear when captured. It is a universal constant. The prey fears the predator. This is natural law." "Maybe we're not prey," Hana suggested. Vorak's second officer, Tivan, stepped forward. He was younger, eager, and clearly annoyed by Hana's attitude. "You will learn fear, human. We have broken thousands of species. Entire civilizations have begged for mercy. You are alone. Your crew is dead, and your world is defenseless. Show the proper respect." Hana looked at Tivan with something close to pity. "Respect is earned, not demanded. You want me to be afraid? You'll have to do better than this." The interrogation continued for hours. Vorak asked about Earth's defenses, its military capacity, its government structure. Hana answered some questions and ignored others. She was careful, selective, giving away nothing that would truly help them. But she watched everything. She noticed how Vorak's confidence seemed to crack slightly with each calm response she gave. She saw how Tivan grew more frustrated and aggressive. She understood that her lack of fear was doing something to them, creating doubt where there should have been certainty. Finally, Vorak ordered her taken to a holding cell. As the guards moved to escort her away, she turned back to face him. "You said you detected Earth 3 cycles ago," she said. "That was your first mistake. We detected you 4 cycles ago. We've been watching you, learning about you, preparing for you. You think you discovered us, but we've been waiting for you to make your move. It was a bluff, but it was a good one." She saw the uncertainty flash across Vorak's face before the guards pulled her from the room. The cell was designed to break prisoners. It was small, cold, and the walls showed images of Valtheris victories. Entire planets burning. Cities reduced to ash. Populations being herded like animals. It was meant to create despair, to show the futility of resistance. Hana studied each image carefully. She analyzed the tactics, the weapons, the weaknesses. Every piece of information was valuable. She didn't feel despair. She felt anger, cold, and focused. These creatures had killed her crew. They threatened her world. They expected her to break. She wouldn't. Days passed. The Valtheris tried different approaches. They deprived her of sleep, blasted her with noise, showed her more images of destruction. Nothing worked. Hana endured it all with the same calm focus she had shown from the beginning. She ate when they fed her, maintaining her strength. She exercised in the small space of her cell, keeping her body ready. She planned. Vorak visited her again on the 5th day. He looked tired, uncertain. "Why don't you break?" he asked. The question sounded genuine, almost desperate. "We have studied your biology. You experience fear like other species. Your heart rate increases, your hormones change, your brain responds to threats. But you don't let it control you." "How?" Hana stood up to face him. "Because humans learned a long time ago that fear is just information. It tells us there's danger, but it doesn't tell us what to do about it. We choose our actions. Fear doesn't choose for us." "That's not possible," Vorak said. "Every species in the galaxy is governed by fear. It is the foundation of all behavior, all civilization, all order." "Then maybe," Hana said quietly, "your understanding of the galaxy is smaller than you think." Before Vorak could respond, alarms began to sound throughout the ship. A young officer burst into the cell area, speaking rapidly in the Valtheris language. Hana didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Vorak turned to her, his expression dark. "Multiple Earth vessels have entered our space. They are not responding to warnings. They are not requesting negotiation." He stepped closer to her cell. "They are coming for you," Hana smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted prey. "I told you," she said. "You should have been paying attention. You took one of ours. Now you're going to learn what that means." Vorak stared at her, and for the first time, Hana saw something in his eyes that satisfied her deeply. She saw fear. The Valtheris flagship's command center was chaos. Officers shouted reports, while warning systems flashed red across every display. Commander Vorak stood at the center of it all, trying to understand what was happening. The human fleet had arrived faster than should have been possible, and they weren't behaving like any enemy he had faced before. 17 human vessels detected, his tactical officer reported. "They're smaller than our ships but moving in irregular patterns. We can't predict their movements. They're ignoring our warning broadcasts," another officer added. No response to any communication attempts. Vorak watched the tactical display. The human ships darted around his fleet like insects, too fast and too erratic to target effectively. Then, suddenly, every human ship broadcast the same message simultaneously. It came through in the Valtheris language, clear and cold. "Return our captain." No negotiation. Tivan stepped beside Vorak, his expression angry. This is an insult. They dare to make demands? We outnumber them. We outgun them. Destroy them. But Vorak hesitated. Something about this situation felt wrong. The humans weren't acting like the other species the Empire had encountered. They weren't trying to rescue their soldier through diplomacy or surrender. They were hunting. Down in her cell, Hana heard the muffled sounds of combat preparation. The guards outside her door were tense, talking in quick, nervous voices. She sat calmly, waiting. She knew Admiral Minho. He had trained her, taught her everything she knew about combat and strategy. He would come for her, and he would make the Valtharis regret taking her. A massive explosion rocked the ship. The lights flickered and went out for a moment before emergency systems kicked in. Hana heard screaming from somewhere above her. The battle had begun. Admiral Minho stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the Valtharis formations break apart under his attack. He was an older man, his hair gray and his face marked by years of military service. He had fought in Earth's colonial wars, survived battles that killed thousands, and lost more friends than he cared to remember. Hana was like a daughter to him, and these aliens had made a terrible mistake. Target their communication arrays, he ordered. I want them blind and confused. Drone Squadron 3. Kamikaze pattern on their escort ships. All other squadrons. Focus fire on the flagship's hangar bays. I want them unable to launch fighters. The human pilots executed his orders with precision. The Valtharis had superior technology, but they fought in predictable formations, following established military doctrine. Humans had learned long ago that doctrine was meant to be broken. Survival demanded adaptation, creativity, and the willingness to take risks that seemed insane to others. A wing of human drones crashed directly into a Valtharis destroyer, their explosions tearing through the ship's shields and hull. The Valtharis weapons destroyed most of the drones, but the few that got through caused devastating damage. It was a trade no rational military commander would make, sacrificing resources for minimal gain. But Minho wasn't interested in resource management. He was interested in creating fear. On the Valtharis flagship, Vorak watched his fleet take damage from an enemy that should have been easy to defeat. His officers were panicking, unable to understand the human tactics. They're wasting their ships, Tivan said, bewildered. Those drones are expensive. Why throw them away for such small damage? They're not trying to win through attrition, Vorak realized. They're trying to terrify us. It was working. The Valtharis soldiers had never faced an enemy that willingly sacrificed itself. Every species they had conquered eventually calculated that surrender was better than death. But humans seemed to have a different calculation. One that valued revenge and loyalty over survival. Commander, they're broadcasting another message, an officer reported. Vorak listened as the cold voice came through again. You have 1 hour to return, Captain Hana, unharmed. For every hour after that, we will destroy one of your ships. We will not negotiate. We will not retreat. Return her, or we will take her. Tivan slammed his fist against a console. We should kill the human. Show them their threats mean nothing. No, Vorak said quietly. He was beginning to understand something fundamental about these creatures. If we kill her, they will never stop. They will hunt us across the galaxy. This isn't about winning or losing to them. This is personal. He made a decision that would have been unthinkable a week ago. Take me to the human prisoner. Hana looked up as Vorak entered her cell. He looked different now, less confident, more troubled. Your people are attacking us, he said. Yes, Hana replied simply. We could destroy them. We have more ships, better weapons. You could try. Vorak studied her. You knew they would come. You knew they would attack rather than negotiate. You are valuable to them. Every human is valuable to other humans, Hana said. We don't leave our people behind. Ever. It's one of our oldest rules. That is inefficient, Vorak argued. One individual is not worth risking an entire fleet. To you, maybe. To us, it's everything. It's why we fight. It's why we win. Before Vorak could respond, another explosion shook the ship, this one much closer. Alarms blared, and red emergency lights flooded the cell. An officer burst through the door, his gray skin pale with fear. "Commander! They've breached the hull. Human soldiers are inside the ship." Hana's heart jumped. Daeun was here. It had to be her team. Daeun had served with Hana for years, the best assault leader in the Earth military. If anyone could breach a Valtherus flagship, it was her. The sounds of weapons fire echoed through the corridors, getting closer. Vorak drew his weapon and pointed it at Hana. "Tell them to stop, or I will kill you." Hana stood up slowly, meeting his eyes. "You won't. Because, if you kill me, you know exactly what will happen. They won't just destroy your ship. They'll hunt down every Valtherus vessel in this sector. They'll make your species remember this day for generations." Vorak's hand shook slightly. He realized the truth of her words. He had thought fear was his weapon, but the humans had turned it against him. By refusing to show fear themselves, they had made the Valtherus afraid instead. The cell door exploded inward. Daeun came through first, her armor scorched from weapons fire, her rifle sweeping the room. Behind her, 3 more Earth soldiers moved with practiced efficiency. They had clearly fought their way through multiple decks of Valtherus defenders. Daeun's eyes found Hana, and relief flashed across her face. "Captain, are you injured?" "I'm fine," Hana said. She looked at Vorak, who still held his weapon, but hadn't fired. "Stand down, Commander. This doesn't have to end with your death." Tivan appeared in the doorway behind the Earth soldiers, his own weapon raised. "Kill them all!" he shouted. What happened next would be replayed in Valtherus military academies for years to come. Daeun's team moved with a speed and coordination that seemed impossible. They had trained for shipboarding actions in Earth's harshest environments, had practiced for scenarios where they were outnumbered and outgunned. They used the confined space of the corridor to their advantage, their smaller size allowing them to move in ways the larger Valtherus couldn't match. The firefight lasted 30 seconds. When it ended, Tivan was dead, along with 6 other Valtherus soldiers. 1 human soldier was badly wounded, her armor breached, and blood spreading across her side. But she was still standing, still ready to fight. "Fall back to the extraction point," Daeun ordered. She looked at Vorak. "Come with us. We need to have a conversation." Vorak followed, not as a prisoner, but as someone who needed to understand. They moved through corridors, filled with the bodies of his soldiers. The humans had cut through his crew like they were nothing, using tactics that were brutal and efficient. Every Valtherus they encountered surrendered immediately, having learned that resistance meant certain death. At the breach point, a small human shuttle waited. The assault team loaded their wounded first. Then, Hana. Vorak stood at the edge, looking back at his ship. It was heavily damaged, its systems failing, its crew demoralized. "Why spare me?" he asked Hana. She paused at the shuttle entrance. "Because you need to go back to your empire and tell them what happened here. Tell them that humans don't fear you. Tell them that if they come for Earth, we will make them regret it. Tell them that fear is not the only power in the universe." The shuttle detached and fled, escaping before the Valtherus could organize a response. Vorak watched it go, and then he looked at the human fleet, still harassing his ships. They weren't trying to destroy the entire Valtherus force. They were making a point, demonstrating their capabilities, and then withdrawing. He understood now. The humans could have died trying to destroy his fleet. Instead, they had accomplished their mission and left, showing that they controlled the engagement from start to finish. It was a humiliation worse than defeat. The Valtherus Imperial Senate chamber was ancient, carved from dark stone that had witnessed thousands of years of conquest and dominion. Today, it witnessed something new. Uncertainty. Commander Vorak stood before the assembled senators, his uniform bearing the marks of his recent defeat. He had been ordered to report directly on the human encounter, and every word he spoke seemed to create more chaos among the ruling class. The humans demonstrated capabilities we did not anticipate, Vorak said, his voice steady despite his shame. They boarded our flagship, extracted their prisoner, and withdrew before we could mount an effective response. Their tactics were unpredictable. Their soldiers showed no hesitation, even when facing certain death, and their prisoner displayed no fear throughout her captivity. An older senator stood, his gray skin darker with age, his eyes sharp. "You are describing basic military competence, Commander. Why should this concern the Empire?" "Why? Because they are not like other species," Vorak replied. "Every civilization we have conquered understood the logic of power. They feared us. They negotiated. They eventually submitted. The humans do none of these things. They responded to the capture of one soldier by attacking an entire battle fleet. They sacrificed expensive resources for minimal tactical gain. They don't calculate warfare the way we do." Another senator spoke up, her voice dismissive. "Then they are foolish. They will waste their resources and destroy themselves." "This is not a threat," but Vorak shook his head. "With respect, Senator, you are wrong. I have studied their behavior extensively since the encounter. The humans evolved as both predators and prey on their world. They learned to hunt while simultaneously avoiding being hunted. This created a psychology that we do not possess. They experience fear, but they have learned to act despite it. They call it courage." The word translated poorly into the Valtheris language. There was no equivalent concept in their culture. Fear was absolute. Obedience was logical. Submission was survival. The idea that a species could acknowledge danger and choose to face it anyway seemed irrational. But while the Senate debated, the news of the human resistance was already spreading. The Valtheris Empire controlled thousands of conquered worlds, and on each of those worlds, populations that had lived in fear for generations suddenly heard a new story. A story of a species that said, no. On the planet Nethara, the insectoid Netheri people gathered in underground chambers to share the news. Their world had been conquered a century ago. Their resistance crushed. Their society restructured to serve Valtheris interests. But now, whispers spread through the hive networks. "The humans fought back," one worker said. "They attacked the Valtheris fleet. And survived," another added. "The Valtheris did not destroy them. The Netheri had always been communal creatures, their strength in coordination and numbers. But the Valtheris had broken their central hives, killed their queens, and scattered them into isolated groups. Fear had kept them compliant. Now, that fear was cracking. On Torvus, a world of crystalline beings who communicated through light and vibration, similar conversations were happening. The Torvani had been philosophers before the conquest, studying the nature of existence and consciousness. The Valtheris had found their peaceful nature easy to exploit, but philosophy could be a weapon too, and the Torvini were beginning to question the assumed logic of their subjugation. Hana stood in Earth's military command center, surrounded by screens showing intelligence reports from across Valtheri's space. She had been debriefed extensively about her captivity, and now she was being briefed on the consequences of her rescue. Admiral Minho stood beside her, his expression serious. "Your capture and rescue has created an effect we didn't anticipate. Multiple species under Valthera's control are showing signs of unrest. Some are attempting to communicate with us. They see us as a symbol," Hana said quietly. "They see that someone can resist." "More than that," a woman's voice added. Jiwan entered the room, carrying data tablets filled with xenosociological analysis. She was Earth's leading expert on alien psychology, and she had been studying the Valtheris Empire's structure for months. They see the fundamental flaw in the Valtheris system. An empire built entirely on fear is fragile. The moment that fear is challenged, everything begins to collapse. Jiwan brought up a display showing the Valtheris hierarchy. "Look at their social structure. Every species they conquer, is placed in a strict ranking based on how dangerous they were before subjugation. The more a species resisted initially, the higher their status in the empire. But they've never encountered a species that continued to resist after initial contact. Because they break them, Minho said. Exactly. But they can't break humans, not the way they need to. We keep coming back, we keep fighting, and every species watching us realizes that submission is a choice, not an inevitability. Hana studied the data, her mind working through the implications. So, what do? We can't fight the entire empire. They still outnumber us massively. We don't fight them, Jiwan said. We inspire everyone else to fight. We become the spark that lights 1,000 fires. It was a dangerous strategy, one that could lead to galactic war on a scale Earth was not prepared for. But looking at the intelligence reports, Hana realized it was already too late. The fires were already starting. The first rebellion began on Nathara. The Nathiri workers simply stopped working. They didn't attack the Valtheris occupation forces. They didn't make demands. They just stopped. The Valtheris responded with their usual tactics, threatening punishment and death. The Nathiri didn't move. Then, one of the workers did something unprecedented. She stood before a Valtheris commander and spoke words that echoed across the galactic communication networks. If the humans do not fear you, why should we? The Valtheris killed her. They killed 100 others who stood with her. But the Nathiri kept standing. For the first time, in a century, they chose death over obedience. And the Valtheris didn't know how to respond to that choice. On Torvus, the rebellion took a different form. The crystalline Torvani began broadcasting messages across all frequencies, spreading philosophy and questions that undermined the Empire's logic. Fear is not wisdom, they transmitted. Submission is not survival. The humans have shown us that there is another way. The Valtheris tried to shut down the broadcasts, but the Torvini simply found new ways to transmit. Their crystalline nature made them natural communication conduits, and silencing them would require destroying the entire species. Earth received delegation requests from both worlds within a week. Hana was chosen to lead the diplomatic team, not because of her diplomatic experience, which was minimal, but because of what she represented. She was the human who had not broken, the symbol of resistance. The meeting with the Nathiri representatives happened on a neutral space station at the edge of Valtheris territory. Hana sat across from the insectoid delegates, their chitinous bodies reflecting light in strange patterns, their multiple eyes studying her with obvious curiosity. "You are the one who did not fear," the lead delegate said. Her translator rendered the clicking sounds of Netheri speech into passable English. "We need to understand how. Our species is dying from compliance. We have forgotten how to resist." Hana chose her words carefully. "I was afraid. Fear is natural. It keeps you alive. But fear is information, not instruction. You can be afraid and still act. You can acknowledge danger and still fight back. The Valtheris taught us that fear means submission." "The Valtheris are wrong," Hana said simply. "And I think you already know that, or you wouldn't be here." The Nathiri delegates consulted among themselves in rapid clicks and gestures. Finally, their leader turned back to Hana. "Will Earth help us? Will you fight alongside us?" "We will," Hana promised. "But understand this will be bloody. The Valtheris won't surrender their empire easily. Many will die." "We are already dying," the Nathiri replied. "At least this way, we die free." Similar conversations happened with the Torvini, and then with other species. Within months, Earth found itself at the center of a growing coalition of former Valtheris subjects, all learning that resistance was possible. But in the Imperial Senate, the debate had ended. The hardliners had won. Empress Surin herself had made the decision. The humans were too dangerous to be allowed to spread their philosophy of resistance. Earth would be made an example. Vorak received his new orders with a heavy heart. He was being given command of a fleet 10 times larger than the one he had lost, with orders to destroy Earth completely. No negotiation, no prisoners, just total extermination. As he prepared his fleet, he thought about Hana and her calm certainty. She had warned him this would happen. She had told him that taking one of theirs would teach the Valtheris what it meant to face humanity. He had thought she was bluffing. Now he realized she had been trying to save both their species from a war neither could afford. And he had failed to listen. The Valtheris war fleet assembled at the edge of known space was the largest military force ever gathered by the Empire. Commander Vorak stood on the bridge of his new flagship, watching hundreds of ships take their positions in the formation. Behind him, his officers worked efficiently, preparing for the attack on Earth. The orders were clear and brutal. Complete destruction. But something was wrong. Vorak could feel it in the way his officers moved, hear it in their voices. There was fear there now, something that had never existed before in Valtheris military operations. They were afraid of humans. "Commander, we're receiving reports from our forward scouts," his tactical officer said. "Earth's defensive fleet is forming up. But they're not alone. We're detecting Netheri vessels, Torvini ships, and at least 3 other species we've identified as former Imperial subjects." Vorak felt his blood run cold. The coalition had formed faster than anyone in the Senate had predicted. The humans hadn't just inspired resistance. They had organized it. On Earth, in the Orbital Defense Command Center, Admiral Minho studied the same tactical displays. The Valtheris fleet was massive. Enough firepower to glass an entire planet, but spread around Earth's system. Preparing to fight alongside humanity were the ships of a dozen different species. They were outgunned, but they were not alone. Hana stood beside him, now officially his second in command. She had spent the last months working with the coalition species, learning their capabilities, helping coordinate their forces. It had been exhausting work, made harder by the fundamental differences between species. But they had learned to communicate, to trust each other, and most importantly, to fight together. "The Netheri are requesting permission to take the Vanguard position," an officer reported. Minho shook his head. "Denied. They're brave, but their ships can't take the initial assault. Position them on the flanks where their coordination abilities will be most effective." "They are," Hana confirmed. "Their communication disruption systems are online. When the Valtheris fleet moves in, they'll find their coordination compromised." It was a tactic borrowed from humanity's own history. You didn't need to be stronger than your enemy if you could make them disorganized and confused. The Valtheris relied on rigid military doctrine and clear chains of command. Break those, and their numerical superiority meant less. The battle began with a Valtheris long-range bombardment, testing Earth's defensive grid. The first wave of missiles and energy weapons was devastating, overwhelming some of the outer defensive platforms. But it also revealed the Valtheris' firing patterns and tactical approach. "They're following standard Imperial assault doctrine," Minho observed. "Vorak hasn't changed his tactics at all. He's still thinking like this is a normal conquest." "Maybe he doesn't know how to think differently," Hana suggested. "The Valtheris have been using the same strategies for centuries. Why change what has always worked?" "Because we're not like anyone they've faced before," Minho said. He opened a channel to the entire coalition fleet. "All forces. Execute pattern. Delta 7. Show them something new." The coalition fleet broke into smaller groups, each moving independently, making it impossible for the Valtheris to predict or counter effectively. The Netheri ships used their hive coordination to execute complex maneuvers that looked chaotic but were perfectly synchronized. The Torvini activated their disruption systems, flooding Valtheris communication channels with false data and scrambled orders. And the human ships did what they did best. They adapted. Dayun commanded one of Earth's destroyer squadrons, and she led her ships in a diving attack through a gap in the Valtheris formation. The enemy ships tried to target her, but she had studied their weapons systems during the flagship boarding. She knew their firing arcs, their reload times, their weaknesses. "All ships, target their power distribution nodes," she ordered. "We don't need to destroy them, just disable them." Her squadron's weapons found their marks with surgical precision. Valtherus ships began to lose power, their shields failing, their weapons going offline. They weren't destroyed, but they were effectively removed from the battle. On Vorak's flagship, chaos reigned. Officers shouted contradictory reports, systems malfunctioned from Torvini interference, and the tactical display showed a battle that made no sense according to Imperial doctrine. How are they coordinating? Tivan's replacement demanded. They're 7 different species with completely different communication systems. They shouldn't be able to work together like this. But Vorak understood. The humans had taught the others something the Valtherus had never learned. Trust. The coalition forces didn't need rigid command structures because they trusted each other to do their part. The Netheri trusted the Torvini to handle communications, while they focused on maneuvers. The Torvini trusted the humans to protect them while they disrupted the enemy. And everyone trusted that their allies would fight to the end, rather than surrender. Pull back the assault wings, Vorak ordered. Regroup at rally point 7. We need to. His order was cut off as a Netheri strike force punched through his screen of escort ships, their small fighters moving in perfect coordination. They didn't destroy his flagship, but they damaged enough systems to force him into a defensive posture. The battle raged for hours. The Valtherus fleet had superior firepower, but the coalition had superior coordination and motivation. Every time Vorak's forces tried to establish a dominant position, the coalition adapted and countered. Every time the Valtherus committed to one strategy, the humans changed the rules. And slowly, inevitably, the Valtherus fleet began to suffer losses. Not catastrophic casualties, but enough to matter, enough to create doubt. In the command center, Hana monitored the battle with growing confidence. They were holding. Against all odds, the coalition was holding the line against the Empire's might. Then her communications officer spoke urgently. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from inside the Valtherus fleet. It's encrypted with our codes. Hana's eyes widened. She moved to the communications station and activated the message. A face appeared on screen. Valtherus, but somehow different. The gray skin, the glowing eyes, but there was something in the expression that seemed almost human, uncertain, afraid. My name is Kira, the Valtherus said. I am a psychologist, formerly of the Imperial Intelligence Service. I was assigned to study the human prisoner, Captain Hana. What I learned changed everything I believed about the Empire. Minho moved beside Hana, listening carefully. I am transmitting the tactical dispositions of the Valtherus fleet. Kira continued. I am also transmitting evidence of dissension within the Imperial military. Many Valtherus soldiers question this war. They have seen the coalition forces fighting together, have witnessed species they thought broken, standing up to resist. They are asking questions that have no good answers in Imperial doctrine. Can we trust this? Minho asked. Hana studied Kira's face on the screen. She remembered the psychologist from her captivity, remembered the questions that had seemed more curious than hostile. I think we can, she said. I think we just got our first Valtherus defector. The tactical data Kira provided was invaluable. It showed weaknesses in the Valtherus formation, revealed which ships were most likely to retreat under pressure, and identified command vessels whose loss would create maximum confusion. But more importantly, it confirmed what Hana had suspected. The Valtherus Empire was not as unified as it appeared. Fear had kept them together. But fear was a brittle foundation. Once it cracked, everything built upon it began to crumble. Transmit Kira's message to all coalition forces, Hana ordered. Let them know the Empire is fracturing. Let them know we're winning not just the battle, but the war for hearts and minds. The battle's turning point came when a wing of Valtherus escorts simply stopped fighting. They didn't surrender. They didn't retreat. They just stopped targeting coalition ships. Their commander, influenced by Kira's message and exhausted by a war that made less sense every day, made a choice. He refused to continue. Other Valtherus ships, seeing this act of defiance, began to hesitate. The iron discipline that had made the Empire's military so effective for millennia was dissolving. Vorak watched it happen with a mixture of horror and understanding. The humans had done exactly what Hana had warned him about. They had shown the galaxy that fear was not absolute, that obedience was not mandatory, that another way was possible. He opened a channel directly to Earth's command center, bypassing his own chain of command. When his face appeared on the screens, both Hana and Minho stepped forward. "Commander Vorak," Hana said. There was no triumph in her voice, just exhaustion. "Are you ready to talk?" Vorak looked at her for a long moment. He thought about the centuries of imperial conquest, about the thousands of species that had surrendered, about the foundation of fear that had seemed so permanent and logical. And he thought about the human woman who had sat in a cell and calmly told him his understanding of the galaxy was too small. "Yes," he said finally, "I believe it is time to talk." Behind him, he could hear his officers protesting, but their voices seemed distant and unimportant. The old ways were dying. Something new was being born, and Vorak realized he could either help shape it or be swept away by it. The battle ended not with a grand victory, but with an exhausted ceasefire. Both sides pulled back, damaged and depleted, to consider what came next. The Valtheris fleet had not been destroyed, but it had been stopped. And for the first time in the Empire's history, that felt like defeat. The throne world of Valtheros Prime had stood for 10,000 years, a monument to conquest and absolute power. Its capital city was built from the ruins of civilizations that had refused to submit, their artifacts and monuments incorporated into Valtheris architecture as warnings to others. But today, something unprecedented was happening. A human was walking freely through the halls of the Imperial Palace. Where the halls, Hana moved through corridors lined with the evidence of 1,000 conquered worlds. Each artifact told a story of resistance crushed and populations broken. She saw weapons that had failed to save their owners, flags from governments that no longer existed, and monuments to species that had chosen extinction over submission. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it made her angry. "The Empress is waiting," her Valtheris escort said. His name was Vorak, though he no longer held the rank of commander. He had been demoted after the failed attack on Earth. But he had also been given a new role: ambassador to the human coalition. It was either a punishment or an opportunity, depending on how he chose to see it. "Are you afraid?" Hana asked him as they walked. Vorak considered the question honestly. "Yes. The Empress has ruled for 3,000 years. She has destroyed species that displeased her. She could kill us both, with a thought. But you came anyway, because you taught me that fear is just information, not instruction," Vorak said. He had spent months studying human philosophy and history since the battle. What he had learned both fascinated and disturbed him. Humans had created beauty and horror in equal measure, had built civilizations and destroyed them, had reached for the stars while simultaneously trying to annihilate each other. They were complicated in ways the Valtheris were not. The throne room was enormous, its ceiling lost in shadows above. At the center, on a throne carved from black stone, sat Empress Surin. She was old beyond measure, her gray skin marked with patterns that indicated extreme age in Valtheris biology. But her eyes were sharp and intelligent, studying Hana with an intensity that felt physical. "So you are the human who broke my empire," Surin said. Her voice was ancient and cold. "I didn't break your empire," Hana replied calmly. "I just showed everyone it could be broken." "There's a difference." Surin rose from her throne and descended to stand before Hana. Even though they were similar in height, the Empress seemed to loom, her presence filling the room with power accumulated over millennia. "Do you understand what you have done? The order I built has kept the galaxy stable for thousands of years. Countless species have lived in peace under Valtheris rule. Peace built on fear is not peace," Hana said. "It's just delayed violence. And what would you replace it with? Chaos? War between species with no authority to maintain order? Cooperation, Hana suggested. Mutual respect. Alliances based on shared interests, rather than terror. Surin laughed. But there was no humor in it. I have watched civilizations rise and fall for 3,000 years, human. I have seen what happens when species are left to their own devices. They fight, they destroy, they consume everything until nothing remains. The Valtheris Empire prevents that. Our fear maintains order. Your fear creates resentment, Hana countered. Every species you conquer is waiting for the moment they can strike back. You haven't created stability. You've created pressure that's building toward an explosion. We just lit the fuse. Before Surin could respond, an alarm echoed through the palace. An officer burst into the throne room, forgetting protocol in his panic. Empress, we have reports of armed forces moving through the palace. Multiple Valtheris military units are converging on this location. Vorak's expression darkened. The hardliners. They've decided to force the issue. Hana understood immediately. There were factions within the Valtheris military that wanted to continue the old ways, that saw any negotiation with humans as weakness. They were staging a coup, planning to kill both the Empress and Hana to restart the war. How many? Surin demanded. At least 3 battalions, Empress. They will reach this chamber within minutes. Surin looked at Hana with an expression that might have been respect. It seems you have forced change, whether I desired it or not. These officers would never have dared such action before you showed them that authority could be challenged. We need to move, Vorak said urgently. There are secure chambers deeper in the palace, but Hana was already assessing the throne room tactically. High ceiling, multiple entry points, limited cover. It was a terrible defensive position. They would be trapped and overrun within minutes if they stayed. But running would only delay the inevitable. How loyal are your personal guards? Hana asked Surin. Absolutely loyal, the Empress replied. But I have only 50 here. The rebels number in the hundreds. Hana activated her communication device. Daeun, I need an immediate extraction at my coordinates. And bring everyone you can. Daeun. 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 We're 3 light years away, Captain. Daeun's voice crackled back. It will take us at least an hour to reach you. Then we need to hold for an hour, Hana said simply. The first wave of rebel Valtheris soldiers burst into the throne room with weapons ready. They expected to find the Empress defenseless, ready for execution. Instead, they found Hana standing beside her, and the human was smiling. You really should have checked who was with her before you tried this, Hana said. The battle that followed would become legendary. 50 Empress guards, and 1 human, against 300 rebel Valtheris soldiers. By every calculation, it should have been a massacre. But Hana had learned the palace layout on her walk to the throne room, had identified defensive positions and choke points, had planned for exactly this scenario. She directed the Empress guards with rapid-fire commands, using human infantry tactics adapted to Valtheris capabilities. They fell back in organized stages, using the palace architecture to negate the rebels' numerical advantage. Every corridor became a killing ground. Every doorway, a defensive position. Vorak fought beside Hana, his weapon finding targets with precision. He had trained his entire life in Valtheris military doctrine. But now, he was learning human tactics in real time. Improvisation, adaptation, and the absolute refusal to surrender, even when logic said defeat was certain. Why are you helping me? Surin asked, during a brief lull in the fighting. She had taken position behind cover, her own weapon in hand. The Empress was ancient, but she had not survived 3,000 years by being helpless. Because if these rebels kill you and me, the war starts again, Hana replied. And because you're starting to understand that the old way can't continue. I understand nothing, Surin said, except that you humans are either the bravest or the most foolish species I have encountered. Why not both? Hana suggested, then leaned out to fire at advancing rebels. The fighting was brutal and close. The rebels had numbers, but they were also dealing with confusion. They had expected an easy execution, not a determined defense. Every minute they failed to break through, more of them began to question their choice. If the Empress could be defended, if a single human could coordinate this kind of resistance, then maybe the old certainties were not so certain after all. Kira appeared halfway through the battle, leading a group of Valtheris who had chosen to support the Empress and the human coalition. She had been broadcasting messages throughout the palace, calling for rational voices to oppose the coup. The rebels are losing support, Kira reported as she took position beside Vorak. Many military units are refusing to join them. Your defense has bought time for people to think, rather than react. 30 minutes into the battle, Dayun's strike force arrived. They came in through the palace roof, using assault shuttles, cutting through the ancient stone with plasma torches. Earth soldiers dropped into the throne room alongside Netheri fighters and Torvini support units. The coalition had arrived. The rebels found themselves suddenly surrounded, facing a combined force that fought with coordination they couldn't match. The coup collapsed within minutes. Those who could surrendered. Those who continued fighting died. In the aftermath, as medics treated the wounded and security forces arrested the survivors, Surin stood among the rubble of her throne room and looked at Hana. "You saved my life," the Empress said quietly. "I saved both our peoples," Hana corrected. "This was never about you or me. It's about building something better than fear." Surin was silent for a long moment, looking at the evidence of the battle. Valtheris had fought Valtheris, something that had not happened in her empire for thousands of years. And they had fought beside humans, coalition species, former subjects who had every reason to hate the empire. "I am 3,000 years old," Surin said finally. "I have ruled through fear because it was efficient, because it worked, because I saw no alternative. But you have shown me something I did not believe possible. You have shown me that fear can be overcome, that species can cooperate despite their differences, that power based on respect is stronger than power based on terror." She turned to face Hana fully. "I do not know if I can change what I have built. The empire is vast, its systems entrenched, its culture based on the very fear you challenge. But I can try. I can begin the transformation." "That's all anyone can ask," Hana said. Over the following months, the galaxy watched as the Valtheris Empire began an unprecedented transformation. Surin issued decrees that shocked her subjects and former enemies alike. Conquered species would be given autonomy. Military occupations would end. The rigid hierarchy based on fear would be replaced with a federation based on mutual cooperation. It was not easy. Many Valtheris officers resigned in protest. Some species that had been conquered refused to believe the changes were real. Violence erupted on several worlds as different factions fought over the new order. But slowly, painfully, the transformation took hold. The empire became a federation. The Empress became a coordinator rather than a tyrant. And at the center of it all, working to build bridges between species that had been enemies for centuries, was Hana. Vorak watched her one day as she mediated a dispute between Netheri and Valtheris representatives. She had become something more than a soldier, more than a diplomat. She had become a symbol of what was possible when fear was not allowed to rule. "You changed the galaxy," Vorak said to her after the meeting. Hana shook her head. "I just showed people they could change it themselves. The courage was always there. It just needed someone to demonstrate it first." Gema. Years later, Hana returned to Earth for the dedication of a memorial to her crew, the ones who had died in that first encounter with the Valtheris. She stood before the monument, reading the names of people she had served with, people she had failed to save. A young Valtheris approached her. He was a child, perhaps the equivalent of 8 human years, visiting Earth with his parents as part of a cultural exchange program. "Excuse me," the child said in carefully practiced English. I am Hana. Confirmed. My teacher said you were never afraid of the Empire. Is that true? Hana knelt down to the child's eye level. She thought about all the fights, all the moments of terror, all the nights she had lain awake, wondering if she would see another day. No, she said honestly. I was terrified. Every single day. The child looked confused. But you fought anyway. You didn't run. Being brave doesn't mean not being afraid, Hana explained. It means being afraid and choosing to act anyway. Fear tells you there's danger. Courage tells you to face it despite the fear. That's the difference. The child considered this seriously. Then nodded. I understand. Thank you, Captain Hana. As the child ran back to his parents, Hana stood and looked up at the memorial. The names of her crew were carved in stone, a permanent reminder of the cost of courage. But around those names, in smaller letters, were messages from dozens of species. Nethiri, Torvani, Valtherus, and more, all thanking the crew of that small Earth vessel for showing them that fear was not destiny. Hana touched the memorial one last time and walked away. The galaxy was still dangerous, still full of challenges and conflicts, but it was no longer ruled by fear. That was enough. That was everything.